Hey guys, welcome to the Do Good Feel Good podcast by one another. I'm Lisa, the co-founder, and I have the wonderful Neil here today.
Hi guys.
He's going to tell us a little bit about his founder journey and a fellow founder as well. So do you want to start off by talking a bit about, let's start with your business first.
Okay, business. What's my business? It's changed a lot actually in the last kind of couple of years since COVID. We were the first infrared sauna studio in Australia back in 2016. And back then, not many people, I would say even globally, knew what infrared saunas were. My wife is a nutritionist, Sue, so we run the business together. I was still working in corporate, working for CBS, the American Broadcast Network. So it was a bit of a side hustle for me at that point. Sue was working full time, but it was still fairly difficult in the beginning. You know, I used to work 9 to 5, I used to cover a few night times. I would do one day on the weekend, and I did that for nearly a year.
Yeah.
So I did feel very much like this is still an entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And fast forward, I suppose, 4 or 5 years, we now have 4 studios across the country. But when COVID hit, the doors shut. And when we realised you can't digitally have a sauna, not yet anyway, like who knows in the future. And it really got us to think, and look, it wasn't as if that we hadn't thought about this before. Like when we first started, we were strategizing, going, well, where do we want to be in 5 years? Mm-hmm. And I remember us putting down on paper that we wanted to be the Coca-Cola for good. You know, we wanted to be as ubiquitous as Coca-Cola, but doing good. And back then, when we were just a studio business, and I say that lightly, we weren't just only a studio business. It's a full-on operation, trust me. But we decided, what can we do? How can we bring that sense of Nimbus to people when they're not in the studio? And as I was saying, we didn't really have a product or service back then, but we kind of started ideating off COVID. Initially, we kind of created this kind of sub-brand called Nimbus Online. And the idea behind that was like, well, we have all these amazing practitioners that work in our studios of all modalities, from massage to, myotherapists to acupuncture, chiros, you name it. And we thought, well, why don't we just put all their knowledge on a platform that is really accessible and affordable for people?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and we kind of rushed to get all that up. We got it running, and just as we kind of got that up and running, COVID started to dwindle away. So the whole like paying for a subscription online, it was like, oh God, it was just kind of bad timing. Yeah. But we still knew we were kind of onto something with this. And then we decided we've always had some iterations of products because of Sue as a nutritionist. So we did have like a face oil iteration way back in the day, but we thought, well, let's really try and lean into this e-commerce because that's where a lot of brands are going into, and it also helps provide scale. So we really paused, took our time. It was about 9 months of working in the background, redeveloping the website, doing a load of work on the brand. We rebranded essentially, with our logo, kept the name, kind of dropped the co. And then we spent time trying to collate a series of products. And then we launched that just only really at last Christmas. Mm-hmm. So it all still feels extremely...
It's really fresh.
Really fresh, yeah. And not to go into too much detail, but we have basically an everyday range, which is more our beauty range. And we've got a face oil, a body oil, and then we have, we call it a hydration supplement, which is called Cloud Form. And it's basically an electrolyte. And the reason why we did that product is 80% of Australians are actually dehydrated every single day because of our climate and how active we are. The oils are great for your skin. They're all pseudo-linked to saunas and that preventative healthcare. But they're our everyday range that basically anyone can essentially afford. Then we have a mid-tier, which is our sauna blanket, which you can buy for home. And then you have our new sauna range, so actual machines that people can put into their homes. Yeah. And that's all, like from day dot, we were always thinking someone might come in, fall in love with Nimbus, and then buy the other brand that we use, and then we don't see them again. Yeah. So it always felt like we were missing something in market, and it's just amazing now to actually have a product that if someone does want to buy a sauna, at least they can buy our sauna. Yeah. So we have a 2-person, a 3-person, an outdoor barrel sauna, and an ice bath. So we're now a kind of a service-based wellness studio with a bit of an e-com side, which I think will outgrow the original business, hopefully, if we do a good job. And then the last part of it is that kind of content piece. Yeah. So not forgetting where we started with Nimbus Online, But what we've done is, rather than taking all that subscription model stuff, we're trying to use that as free content as a way to just bring people into our brands. And when you think about that last piece, really anybody in the world, hopefully at some point, will have access to that, because most people have a mobile phone.
Yep.
So if we've got content on our website that's free, videos, and we've done videos, audio, written content, things on diet, you know, summer diet plans, and we've done talks on fertility. Like, we do a whole range of things. So yeah, hopefully one day anybody in the world, if they've got a phone, can, you know, engage with us. So that's a long-winded answer. There's a lot going on.
There's so much that I wasn't aware of, so congratulations, like that's
part of, well, that is part of our problem, because people know us as the sauna studio guys, and that is a challenge, because, you know, you're dealing with a certain demographic in a service-based industry of people who are pretty much into their wellness. There's a whole raft of challenges to try and get into the average Australian in that market to get people to come have a sauna. Never mind trying to sell an at-home sauna machine, which the prices start from 8,900. You know, so it's a big difference in the sell, you know, the buyer's journey. You're going from getting a $50 sauna to a $10,000 sauna machine. It's a very different marketing mix, and that has been challenging. And hopefully one day we'll be able to go beyond ANZ and into US and stuff like that. So yeah, it's certainly not going to be easy, but, you know, you got to put yourself out there. You got to take that chance, and hopefully, you know, it will all happen.
But you never really know how it's going to evolve, do you? Like, a lot of it, when you set up a business, you're being informed by your customer and kind of like pivoting and realigning based on how they interact with your brand. What I think is really cool is that you were kind of ahead of the curve when it came to that wellness movement. You know, you're obviously pre-COVID. Infrared saunas were not as prominent as they are now. So well done for seeing that opportunity.
Yeah. Although that means nowadays no one gives a rat's ass really about that. Because if your massage place or your local facialist has one, like, it's still, we have all these levels of we don't like saying competition, but we think there's plenty of room for everybody.
Of course.
But you've got your straight up sauna studios, but now you have gyms or bathhouses, or, as I said, hair salons. Some hair salons have saunas.
Wow.
Yeah, we just had a salon in Victoria who bought one of our saunas, which is great, like, you know. But I'm like, that's the level of complexity that is happening in the market now. And I call them, like, basically primary, secondary and tertiary competitors. They're all still somewhere that you can go for a sauna that might not be with us, you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful, and I think it definitely feeds into that self-care aspect. I think coming out of COVID, people have become more aware of their health and wellness, and obviously it affected a lot of people's mental health. Like, obviously one another is about bringing people together and being there for one another. But one thing that I feel quite passionately about, and I know you do too, is being there for yourself.
Yes.
So you mentioned about how you were working a full-time job and that you were hustling on the side with Nimbus. Talk to me about that journey, because I know it isn't easy to spin the
No, it's not. And I think for a long time I kind of dealt with it okay. Like, you know, I used to think, super busy, I can juggle all these things and I'm fine. And that was maybe true in some sense for a long time, but then, you know, I think maybe I'm just getting a little bit more nostalgic when you're older, but I've got, you know, a 2.5-year-old son, and Sue has another business. You know, things get more and more complicated as you get older. And it's not easy. Like, back in the corporate days, I kind of go, fuck, I had to just stay there. Sometimes it would have been a lot easier, you know.
Less of a headache.
Less of a headache, no stresses when you leave at 5 o'clock. You know, I used to have 3 screens, my setup was all there. You come in, do your thing, and, you know, you raise your head for lunch and stuff. Like, it was. Whereas when you work for yourself, even post-COVID, you know, working from home is not an environment that I was built in, you know, so I found actually that transition to be a lot more challenging than my corporate days. But yeah, like, the other thing I would say before I go any deeper is, like, I definitely don't have things together. You know, people might, I know sometimes, especially because you're in wellness, people think, oh, you guys are killing it, you know, you're doing all these stuff, and people only see one side of it, and we always often joke about underneath we're schlepping, our feet are going like this 1,000,000 miles an hour, just trying to keep up. And when you're running your own business, you're trying to do everything to make it a success, but what ends up happening is you stretch yourself so thin that you end up doing so many things, juggling so many things, that you're not doing things to the degree that they need to be done. And that's been a big learning curve for particularly me and us as a business in the last year or two, because I worked in corporate right up until about, I think it'll be 3 years this October, when I left CBS after 5 years. So it still hasn't been that long that I've been fully engaged in the brand. That's when things went down. But you know,
it's happened that way.
Yeah, there's a bit of a pattern. But it's certainly been a challenge, that transition for me. And then you add a kid into that, and it's just like it's been tough. And I think we've had a lot of turmoil in our lives just personally over the last year or two. Like even in the last month, we've had just. I was away in Europe on a business trip, came back, Sue had influenza, like a really bad dose, then I got it, Sonny got it, then I dislocated my knee, I'm only barely just walking, and that was only a week and a half ago. Then we lost our family dog on last Tuesday, Chucky, he's 13. He was like an OG Nimbus marketing tool. He used to sit in the window.
Mascot.
Yeah, he was just looking back at the photos. So like it's just been like, it just kicks, you get kicks in the gut, but you've got no choice but to keep going, you know. And then I think just society, the industry, everything is getting a bit tighter at the moment. People are feeling the pinch. Superannuation's gone up, minimum wage has gone up, rent goes up. Like these things keep going up, and when you're in the service game, it's just getting more and more challenging. We've seen businesses like the restaurant industry has just been completely kneecapped. Like all these top restaurants are just falling by the wayside because they can't survive. And we've been at the brink, like on numerous occasions, where you're going to bed going, I genuinely don't know how we're going to get through this week. Like honestly,
you don't know how we're going to keep the lights on.
Yeah, it's really gotten that bad. And we've had a few people who, you know, hold a very dear place in our heart, who helped us at various times, and if it wasn't for their help, we'd be gone. Like it's simple as that. And I think it's important to be transparent about that as well. And even from your own, like it really only feels in the last maybe year or so that things have only really got serious, like if that makes sense. Because we were kind of, not that you're coasting, but there was a lot of more safety back in the earlier days, whereas now we're trying to grow, we're trying to develop the brand, but it all costs money. Like, you know, we were starting looking at the UK, then the costs start spiraling around legal and accounting, and before we'd even like lay foot on the ground, like, and we had to just pause all that going. And it's so easy as a business owner, especially a small to medium business, like to just lose run of things very, very quickly, and you just have to get one big knock, one issue, and you know, it can really set you back. And like, we're trying to be as positive as we possibly can, but it just feels like so many things have hit us in the last year or two. Like we had an electricity shutout in the studio in Bondi that wasn't our fault. We lost business for a few days. We invested in ice baths originally, and then they all broke. Like you're just talking $10,000-$15,000 per unit. Like all these are big chunks of money that just go, and it's not because of your effort. It's because of something out of your control, and that is challenging to deal with all that, you know. You've still got to keep the lights on, as you say, like, you know.
100%. And I do think there is this misconception that when you're a founder of a business and people recognise it, you know, they think that you've made it, and it's the same with one another. You know, we work really, really hard to keep the lights on, and you know, to portray this image, you know, that we are a certain level. But the reality is, as you said, we're like ducks on water, you know, with our feet underneath. And I think there is a movement which I'm really happy about, of people being transparent and authentic and saying, I've cried myself to sleep at night on more than one occasion, you know, and it's been difficult, and I really am grateful for you being honest as well, because if we're all a little bit more honest, that whole comparison play.
Well, I've had to get used to the fact that we could potentially go bankrupt, like, and that's a reality, and that's even more of a stark reality when you have a child, you know, when you think like we're putting his life in jeopardy. But then at the same time, if you flip it on the other side, and look, you see a lot of stuff out there going like, fail as many times as you want, and all, that's all well and good on paper. But when you've got people's livelihoods on the line, that's not as straightforward as it seems. But when you start kind of taking control of, well, if I did went bankrupt tomorrow, like, so what? Like, do you know what I mean? I could just, you know, we've got family, you've got friends, like you're safe, you're in Australia, you couldn't ask to be in a better country in the world to take a risk like this compared to somewhere like America, where you know, there's no welfare there, you know. So that's why I think, like, when you start taking control and you go, well, fuck it, and then hopefully things start changing, because you start going, well, why not? Like, then you're really in that kind of entrepreneur zone of like, okay, I'm on my last leg here, I've got to do something to fix this. And that's when you really hustle like there's no tomorrow. So often those kind of places that bring you into a low spot, they actually then project you into a whole other area. And you know, I'm sure if you interviewed 100 of the top entrepreneurs, 99 of them would have some kind of battle story that would be something similar, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. I feel like, yeah, as a founder, and just personally, I am a big believer that all the times when I feel like I've crashed and burned, when something has happened and I feel like the universe is conspiring against me, and I feel like, because obviously I've got an 8-year-old little boy as well, and I'm a single mum, so it's like it's really on me to step up. But I can say with absolute certainty every single time, even when I've been at rock bottom, that I've been able to push myself back up again. You know, and it sounds so cliche, but rise again bigger and stronger with the lessons that I've learned. But it's true. Doesn't make it any easier when you're in it.
Yeah, no. When you're trying to close your eyes and you're going, ah. But then funnily, as you say, like funnily when you're there, it's like that money is abundant thing, you know. Like, and I'm like, I came from Ireland, very like money story, scarcity complex, all these kind of things. Sue was the opposite, always going, money is abundant. And I was going, oh, that's a naff. Like, but even when you're in those places, money just comes into your sphere. Yeah. And you're going, gosh, when I think of like how lucky was that money came in at that time. But, you know, you feel like, oh, I've got this $10,000 thing that's come up, but then somehow $10,000 just comes in.
Isn't it crazy how that happens? Like I've become very spiritual in the last couple of years, and I absolutely believe in that, and I think it helps with my mental health as well. I very much have this live in flow type mentality now, where before that I was constantly in a state of fight or flight, you know. It was exhausting. Well,
that your question about what was it like I think that's how I survived in corporate. I was constantly in fight or flight. I could operate on little or no sleep. I'd get coffee in the morning and I could function, and I was hitting sales targets, and I always performed. I was always getting promotion. Always, like my trajectory was like that, but it was all built on very shallow walls, like, you know, and when I had an incident in my corporate life probably 7 years ago, like a bullying scenario of a guy who was in advertising land, and it wasn't just me. He ended up, you know, getting fired from the company, but that really rocked me, and I didn't actually know what was going on at the time. But what was actually going on, because I went through psychology with all this, was I was bullied when I was about 7 or 8 back in Ireland, and it was unresolved trauma that got triggered. And at this point, I was like a 33-year-old man at this stage, right?
Still there.
Yeah, if you don't solve unresolved trauma, you could get through the whole of your life unscathed. That might happen, which I did for a long time. But all it takes is one scenario like that, and I was zapped back to the schoolyard, and I was literally rocked to my core, because I'd never in all my corporate life had anyone ever question my integrity, my quality of work, and I was just trying to do my job. And I was like, and then you start second guessing yourself. And then I started to get all this other stuff going on, and I went and really, that's when I really started like the seriousness around my own personal journey. Yeah. And went to psychologists and all kinds of everything, coaching, trained to be a Vedic meditation, did all stuff, and it wasn't easy in the beginning. When I first started to doing it, it was like cracking open Pandora's box. Literally. Yeah, and for literally 5 or 6 years, I felt like, fuck, what have I done here? And then I started getting performance anxiety, anxiety just generally. I always had depression, you know, that was something I had from a young age, but I felt like, I joke about this, but depression seems like the easier of the three, to be honest.
No, I've heard that before.
Yeah, because depression, you can, don't get me wrong, it can be, you can feel down and things like that. But usually, you know, you can do things, exercise to get you through the day, and you can. Whereas anxiety kind of just hangs around, and then panic attacks is another one. So I've had to do a lot of work in the last. It's only really in the last couple of years have I been able to not cure myself, because that's a big learning thing I've had to learn. It's not about curing yourself. Yeah, I'll always have it, but it's just how do I deal with it? What are the tools that I have? And that took a long time to get to that realization. And even doing something like this, you know, I was getting a little bit coming over here, but 2 years ago, I probably couldn't have done it. Wow. Which is really interesting, because anyone that would know me, I've done this all my life.
Yeah, you would never think
No,
that.
And I love it. I've spoken at conferences, I've been on Like I was on an ABC show called Space 22, which was a couple of years ago. That kind of like was an amazing experience, but also I was in it with 700 Australians talking mental health for 4 weeks on set, and that kind of did open up a lot of stuff. So yeah, like it does take a long time to get a grip of it, but now that I have gotten into that place, I am able to cope with a request like this because I know what I can do to get my mindset right, you know?
You know, they've got the tools available. It's interesting you talk about that. So I did a pitch in October last year for one another, and we just launched our new CSR initiative, and I'd just been let go from a job for having my PR agency, which they knew about the whole time. A relationship had just come to an end. There's a few things that happened, and I went up to go and pitch, and it's never happened to me ever in my life. But it's almost like I didn't have the capacity to store any information in my head, and I completely choked, completely and utterly choked. And it took me 8 months to get back on the stage again, because it would just perpetuate as this fear inside me that I'm not good enough, that I'm going to let Chris down, or I'm going to embarrass myself. So when you talk about the tools to be able to know that you can equip yourself to be able to put one foot in
and
the
it's also not easy because it's a fucking kaleidoscope of stuff like out there to try and deal with these things, and that's a big thing, a big bear bug I've had for a long time around mental health, is that there is no pathway around mental health. I used to talk about it back when I used to work in Ireland for Special Olympics. We used to have pathways for athletes back then. I always use a comparison of like, if you break your arm tomorrow, instinctively all of us, even children, know what we need to do. You need to know, I need to get to the hospital, you'll get a cast, doctors will look after you, you'll then have your cast signed and becomes a kind of a social kind of cool thing, and then at the end of it your bone heals stronger than it did before. Now what is that? If I asked you what's the equivalent of that in mental health, or the lovely gentleman behind the camera, or his mum, or anyone else, you'd get different answers. Because what is it? Like, what is the first thing you do if you, like, maybe you speak to your partner, maybe you could go to a GP, do you go to a psychologist? So there's no clear pathway, and that's a real challenge, not just in Australia, but globally. And that's what has got me into advocacy big time in mental health, and I was involved with a mental health charity where we met many, many years ago, the Light Ball. Now I also have a mental health podcast myself with Gary, who's my co-host, and what we try and do is just normalise the topic, talk about things like it ain't no thing, because in our mind we think, well, we should be able to have open and honest conversations with anyone at any time, because if we can't, how are we going to solve it,
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's clear that when people have, I hate the term do the work, because I feel like it's cliche, but I feel like if you've taken the time to invest in yourself and do talk therapy or whatever that looks like, I feel like you learn these things like trauma, childhood trauma, or you learn about your attachment styles, and you spoke about scarcity, complex mindset before, and I feel like the more people that equip themselves with the knowledge about these very real things, a mother wound, for example, and the more we have these types of conversations, more people can maybe, like you say, figure out what their personal pathway is to get to where they want to be. Because I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and that's been my pathway, figuring out how to manage that, and hot and cold therapy is part of that, my coping with that, and habit stacking. What were you going to say before I cut you off?
I can't even remember. I was like a trainer. It's a bad, because in our podcast that we've learned is, we were talking to an expert before, it was like, you people can, because the same, if you have, like, my wife has ADHD as well, and I have, my attention span is terrible as well, but I think when someone's saying something, I try and think of what I want to say, but then you're not intrinsically listening, which is another thing. No, but I think what I was going to say is, when you mentioned some of those scarcity factors, things that you have, I'm the same, and when you start going into that, I start going into this self-help reading stage, and which was all great, but then you start going, well, imposter syndrome, that's me. Insecurity, that's me. I'm not good enough, that's me. You start like kind of self-diagnosing yourself, and that's what I was saying earlier on about awareness then becomes overwhelming. I was then going around going, shit, I've got all these things, what, like, and then throw in the kind of performance anxiety stuff, and then it starts going around in your head, and you think, God, there was a bit of ignorance is bliss when I was just in fight or flight mode, drinking the coffees, not getting sleep.
Yeah.
And I tried to make the stupid decision of trying to look inward, which then opened Pandora's box. But the thing is, it would be great to even know at that stage, or to have a qualified practitioner to go, this is normal, Neil. That's what I was missing. It's normal to get this. This is a stage you go through where awareness brings overwhelm. That's stage 1 or whatever it may be. What you can do from here is X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
That might work for you, it might not work for me. Like meditation, I did it. I thought that was going to solve my problems. It didn't.
It didn't.
No. But also I would say I've never properly been doing it consistently for a long period of time either. So I have to hold my hand up with that. But it could be anything. It could be yoga, it could be changing your job, moving away from your partner. As you put it nicely, it's like each person has their own journey and that's different. But it would at least be good to have guidance, go, this is normal. And it was only really when I worked with a guy called Dara Byrne, who's an Irish guy, he was living in Sydney, but now he's in Bali. And he used to be a bricklayer. And then he just went to one of those, what's the name of the courses, the 3-day course, changed his life, quit his job, and now he's a coach.
Oh, wow.
And when I worked with him, you know, it was a big investment financially, but when I worked with Dara, he just handbraked me, you know, all the time. And he gave me so many tools to kind of primal screaming and things like this. And it was only really then that I started to kind of like almost like address some of the trauma head on.
Yeah.
And have somebody else guide me through it.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Dara moment for me could be something else for someone else, but like I always encourage people just to keep going, because I do hear a lot of people say, oh, I went to a psychologist, he was a weirdo or whatever it was.
Yeah, didn't find the right fit for them.
Yeah, I'm not going back to that. But how I always answer that is, well, you're going to have shit meals in a restaurant, you're going to have bad coffee. Does that mean you're never going to eat again? No, it doesn't. You just go to another restaurant. You find your one that you like.
I love that.
Yeah, so you have to think about it like that. Like if you, and it was the same. I had a psychologist who, for the phase that I was in, served a purpose. It was the first time ever I got really talking about things.
Yeah.
And I mean below a surface level, like really, because gosh, I mean I could talk for so much just here, but I've always been gregarious in talking, but I think that was part of my defense mechanism.
Trauma response.
Yeah, so I built this thing of, when I was back in Ireland, everything's fine, everything's okay, everyone liked me. I used to hate when someone didn't like me, and then I used to pander to them so they'd eventually like me. Like it's pathetic, like.
Oh, but it's just like, it's what we grew up like though, isn't it, as well, and that people pleasing, not setting boundaries, you know. I don't know if it's like the north of England and Irish, but that's just the way we're brought up.
Yeah, you're just like, I don't want anybody to not like me. That was my thing, because I think, I don't know, maybe in my head it was, if someone doesn't like you, you're not going to succeed, you're not going to get out of this or whatever. And that's when you put up these really false things. And the very first thing that ever drew my awareness to was actually a coaching like thing, which was like a 10-week coaching thing. And I did a test, you know, and he came back, my likability score was 10 out of 10. My accountability and responsibility was 1 out of 10.
Wow.
So I was like, holy shit. And that was what really catapulted me on this. This is going back now 10 years, I'd say, early days of my Australia. But yeah, the psychology, to go back to that point, he got me talking about it, but I'd always talk, that wasn't a problem, but it was getting to the deep stuff was the hard part. Yeah. And he said to me, it took me like 3 or 4 months. He said I would just come in. I'm even thinking about it now, hopefully I'm not doing that on this podcast, but he said I'd just come in and just start talking.
No, not at all. I feel like, and every single day we're learning about ourselves as well, and we're like applying what we know to be true, what we're learning along the way. And I feel like it's great that you had that moment that was your aha Dara moment or whatever, because I feel like a lot of people are having those at the moment in terms of realising that we do all have these things. You know, you're not abnormal if you suffer from anxiety and you have panic attacks and you have low self-worth and you're a people pleaser who can't set boundaries. Like that's probably 80% of the population, and
it's going up. All the studies and all of the insecurities and everything, that it's all going that way because of social media, constant connectivity. There's so much more pressure on us constantly, and you could be doing great in whatever your life is, and you can go on Instagram for 10 seconds and I'll see some guy who's in the same age group as me, got a new car, or he's been promoted into a job, or he's just been hired by Google or whatever, and I go, fuck, he's doing better than me. and then you go inward, and then you go in a spiral.
Yeah, it's honestly,
you know?
something Chris and I are very passionate about. My favourite phrase in the whole entire world is comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes, I love that, yeah.
And I feel like social media is just that in one big, ugly, like technological fiend demon. And
I'm terrible at it, and that's the thing, like I never try and project that, like, I eat clean, I do all these things, like, I do my best, but I eat burgers, and I was in Italy and I had a cigarette one night because I was like, I'm in Italy, felt like a cool thing to do. And I'm not saying like I'm no angel whatsoever, and I think that's the only downside to wellness at the moment, coupled with societal demand, is that there's a thing out there that people think, oh, I can be like whoever. But just because someone has a bikini body or a six pack doesn't, like, their body shape could be different to you, their scenario is different to you, they're not, you know what I mean, like physiologically you're not the same as them. So and what is success to you versus success to me, like, are totally different things. So you'll never win that comparison thing, never.
Definitely not. And I've learned the hard way again that it has to come from source, it has to come from you, like you are the source, and if you can make sure you've got your self-worth as much as possible and you're leading with your North Star, which is you're living by your core values and you're doing your best, and you're human and you're not perfect and that's okay, then I don't think you can steer yourself far wrong. And I think it comes back to that self-care aspect. So what I'd love to kind of like close up with is like how you I guess fill your token cup up when things do get a little bit tricky, and maybe someone who's watching or listening.
Well, I would definitely say in the last month or two I haven't been doing that well, being totally honest. I'm trying to get back into a gym environment. I think exercise is key, but whether it's through Nimbus, saunas, ice baths, the podcast, I've learned a lot over the last few years particularly, and I think it is challenging sometimes to have that one silver bullet to know what you're doing, but I always think about the simple things, what are the kind of foundational things you need to have that you can control, right? I can't control that my dog passed away, I can't control someone turning off our electricity in the studio, but what I can control is things like sleep, what I eat, and some of the choices that I make. So sleep is a big thing. Sleep is a foundational stepping stone to just general well-being. You could be training super hard, your nutrition could be really, really good, and if you're not sleeping, it's going to go out the window. And it's the same with the others. Like if your diet's off, but you're sleeping and you're training hard, you're still not going to see the same benefits. I think balance is key. 80-20. I like to have a burger. I like to do all those things. I maybe sway too much into that end at the moment. I love chocolate. Could always be a little bit better, but I think get your sleep right. Try and eat as healthy as possible, and then exercise is definitely key. And I don't mean necessarily going to the gym. Like most of the research will tell you that low impact exercise is actually better for your longevity. So things like walking is actually better than hitting the gym 3 times a week. Yes, that will make you more buff and toned and stuff, but the jury is still out in terms of whether that will actually support your overall longevity. So, and that's a big thing, especially for males, is that, whenever we get a moment, it's like, I need to go for a run or go to the gym or go meet the boys. We don't go, let's go and have a mindfulness practice or meditate or do some breath work. But we should be doing that. And that's an area that I've been trying to lean into a little bit more. And as I said, like, I'm not meditating all the time, but it's in my toolkit. And I know on a given day I can whip it out of my bag and use it. Same with breath work. And then the big thing I've been doing more recently in the last year has been gratitude.
It's huge. It makes such a difference.
Yeah, and I keep bringing it up naturally. And I'm like, if you had asked me about gratitude a year ago, I would have said, "Feck, I don't believe in that." I'm writing in a journal. Ariana, what's her name? Did she have the gratitude book? Ariana. She's like the big entrepreneur.
I'm not sure. I know, Huffington.
Yeah. She had that book. It was in her head. She's a brilliant podcast and all that. And I was like, it's just not for me. But gratitude was almost forced down my neck in a bit, because I was involved with this run last year called Run Grateful, which was in Bondi. So I was part of that, and it was a group of guys, and there was about 20 of us. Trent was there from the 440 Club, and Rory Warnock, Breathwork. There was all the kind of good guys around the area. But it was like all ages. There was like 20-year-olds right up to like nearly 50-year-olds, and it put me out of my comfort zone. But it was about gratitude. So Mark White, who's the founder, who's from the UK. It was about running a grateful mile. So he has a business, like a charity over there, and he brought us to Australia about, when you go for a walk, like just spend some time in the gratitude space.
Yeah.
So that whole 24 hours was an unbelievable experience of men coming together, letting their walls down and sharing stories and really kind of succumbing to that kind of masculinity, And I got an injury about 9 months ago, and I felt like, initially I was like, you're weak, you're pulling out. And then Mark just grabbed me and was like, no, you need to surrender to this process. It's okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was a lovely moment. And gratitude can be in all shapes and sizes. Like, I've been doing it more like in the mirror. So I did this 30-day challenge just the month before, where I read about how to reset your neural pathways.
Yeah.
So I brushed my teeth with my right
with
hand. Yeah, and then I did 10 I love yous into the mirror.
How powerful is that?
Yeah. Well, you're looking into your own eye. You're like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And the first time I did, she was like, what the fuck are you doing in there? And I'm like, and then the last bit was 25 really big, strong. And by the end, like when you do that, it takes about 3 minutes to do that.
Yeah.
And it's free. And when you do that, you're like, what the hell? You get this natural high.
Yeah,
and if you do that every morning, you're like, so I started doing it. Then you start going, I need to do this every day. Like, why can't I do this every day? And that's the funny thing with a lot of this is that it's like you don't need to spend that much money.
Yeah.
Of course, you can come in for a sauna with us and pay 60 quid or whatever, and all those things can, Pilates, yoga, they all form a lovely mix into your routine. But a lot of the mindfulness can be free, and it doesn't need to be complicated. It can be simple. It can be as little as making the choice to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And we spoke to Nick, who was the CEO, he was the CEO of Batir. He's a great guy.
He's great. He's at Street Side Medics now.
Yeah, he moved on,
I went to the ball last year. He's amazing. I was sat with him and his fiance.
Yeah, they got engaged as well. Yeah, I know. It's been a big year for a lot of people. But Nick was talking about micro moves for macro changes, and that really stuck with me. And he's thinking, like, if you think about your day, like, don't think about, I've got that thing next week. Just drill it down to a lot of people call it living in the now.
Mm-hmm.
So you wake up, your alarm goes off. The first choice you can make is, I can snooze or I can get out of bed. If you get out of bed, you're already in the green. You're already making a positive step. You have a shower, you have a cup of tea, you put your clothes on. You could sit around, you might go for a walk, you could go for a swim if you're down by the beach. You start doing those things, they snowball. It's making your bed.
It's that habit stacking.
Yeah, habit stacking, and then all of a sudden, then your day is set. And if you do that regularly, they're the things you can control. And so it doesn't need to be complicated. Wellness, well-being doesn't need to be complicated.
Yeah.
It's about going back to the basics. It's about living in the now. Do things that are realistic, and don't beat yourself up if you're not maintaining it. You'll go through patches.
Yeah.
And we interviewed these amazing ladies who have a podcast on grief. Sally.
I know Sally.
Sally, yeah.
I used to work with her at Frank PR.
Oh, she's absolute legend.
She's
and
so lovely.
they spoke about grief, and
Good morning is the name.
Good morning, with the U, morning,
yeah.
And they both lost their mums, unfortunately, at the same time. But then they turned it into this beautiful, positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they spoke about how the people talk about the 5 stages of grief, denial, anger, and they were like, it's absolute bullshit. If you actually drew a map of what grieving is like, it'd be like a snake. Yeah, snake's wedding, like just stuff everywhere. And they said that's okay. And whether it's alcohol at that time that needs to get you through a week or whatever it may be, like these things have a purpose. And your journey is going to be different to my journey. Yeah. And also when you think about grief, you don't want to get over the loss of someone. Like I thought that was really beautiful. It's like, I don't want to get over.
You've still got the love to give them, and that doesn't go away. Yeah,
I don't want to forget it. I don't want to forget them or your dog or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. It's about like taking them with you on your journey and like just letting it settle in, whatever way that is. It could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. So, you can really kind of. I think there's lovely stuff going on out there that is just really going back to basics and throwing all what we've been told out the window and just getting back to basics and doing what's right for you. And I also have a big issue with that term, be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, it's like I'm just me anyway.
Oh, I hear it all the time, and I'm like, and people go, oh, but I kind of agree with that. And I've been challenged. Like I was on a panel and I said that, and someone goes, well, I actually disagree with you. And I was like, all right, well, tell me why.
Yeah.
And the reason why I don't like it is because what is the best version of you? Like if I was asking, what's the best?
That's the question. I don't know. Probably.
It's hard to answer, right?
Yeah, you'd be pausing, you're thinking, you're like, I don't know.
But then even if you, let's say, objectively think you know what that is, okay, then what happens when you get to that moment? Then what? What do you do then? You know, and it just sets you on this perpetual, you know, what you got inertia of, well, how am I going to one up myself? And Alan Watt, who's a philosopher, British philosopher, he's no longer alive, but he's an amazing guy to listen to, his voice, and he's just amazing. And he talks about this constant need to one up ourselves.
Yeah.
And I was in that vortex as well of like, got to get the next job, got to get the promotion, got to do this.
When I get to this, when I get that.
Yeah. And when I was going through all the ins and outs of my psychologist, one day he asked me, when are you going to be content? And I said, oh, you know, maybe when I'm 80 and I'm sitting on the porch and my grandkids are running around.
Hi then.
And he goes, so you're going to be content when you're 80, when you're nearly like out the door. And I was like, oh fuck, he was so right. And like it's the journey, it's all the things in between. So I think it's more about just try and do your best each day. Something like that would be more, or like even like as I said, some days you can't do your best, you know. You know,
and that's okay too.
And that's okay too.
Yeah.
So that's why I think be the best version of yourself is just an unrealistic target that like I don't think we can ever meet. And if we do meet, what's the next thing on the list?
What you're striving for. It's like that when you're speaking about neural pathways. Yeah. It's like when people say like when I get to 55 kilos, I know I'll be happy. And it's like change that what happens when you get to 55 kilos, like what you're searching for then, or it should be what you're aiming towards is to be healthy and show up in a way that you're proud, you know, every day. Yeah, because you've got the ongoingness of that. Because
even weight, like let's just use that as an example. I was only talking to someone about this the other day. Like before I left Ireland, I was kind of playing soccer. Like I've been a semi-pro soccer my whole life. I was also doing road running. And it was because of a girl. I was like really cringe to say that, as you do, the things you do like for someone to like you, huh? Yeah. But I ended up doing like fun runs, 5Ks, 10Ks, and she was a great runner. And then I got really into it, and I was in a running club for about maybe 6 to 12 months before I came to Australia. I got to a point where I was 9% body fat. Whoa. And people used to say to me, well, what happened then is people would say, oh, you look real skinny. Yeah. That was like almost like an opening dialogue I would get. And then I wasn't happy at all in terms of my look and feel. Yeah, I was fit and I enjoyed that part of it. But having people coming up calling you skinny all the time was not a good thing for me. No. So you could arguably say, well, that was the fittest I've ever been in my whole life. But was I actually secure in my own like self? I don't think so. Yeah. You know, and you hear people often show photos of when they're super fit and training hard versus when they're just normal. They go, I was actually more happy when I'm normal. Because when I was back those days, I wouldn't eat carbs unless I was training. Be very cautious about food I'd eat. And, you know, was I enjoying myself? I don't know. Like, it's hard to answer that, like, you know? Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing, is to be happy. I read a book recently to wrap this up succinctly in a bow. I feel like we could talk for days, to be honest with you. I literally could speak to you. I warned you at the beginning. I was like, we need 3 episodes. No, I could literally speak for hours. But I feel like I read a book recently, and it wasn't a self-help book, it was a girly romance novel. And the whole theme of it was the wave is it. So it's like when you go surfing and they're like, is it catching the wave? You know, is it when you're doing it? Is it when you go to the ocean and you've completed it? And the whole premise is just enjoy. And again, cliche, but just enjoy the journey. The wave is it. Yes. And I love the fact that this isn't a dress rehearsal. You know, this is our life. Let's show up now. Yeah. And the funny thing is, all those stories about electricity going off, and we've had so many stories, was that, you know, they could be a nightmare in the moment. They're often the stories that you go to when someone goes, well, how's it been? Yeah. You go, you wouldn't believe it. And you go, so you actually like, you almost are like, not proud, but like they become part of you. It's part of the story as well, isn't it? It's got you to where you are. And if you can get past them and challenge, like, God, we've had a hectic year, we got through all these things. When you start looking back and go, fuck, you know what? We actually are doing all right. And that was another thing Dara did with me before the exercise was, when my self-worth was low, he would say, well, I want you to do this exercise. Again, free, super simple. Get a pen, a piece of paper. From the day you were born, just write down a number of how many people you've come in touch with throughout your life, you've impacted. So I was born, I'm a family of 5, there's 5. I've got 30 cousins, grandparents, went to school, football team. Do the math on it. You'll go into the millions. You will go into the millions if you fast forward to today. And when you start thinking about that, you go, well, little old me has had a big impact on this world, good or bad. So you are worthwhile, but you need to fill up your cup.
Yes.
I was thinking about that earlier on. What people might go, well, I'm feeling down, or I'm my insecurity, or I'm anxious. This is just my personal thing, but the only way I've found a way out of that is to fill your cup back up. Yep. You need to work on getting your confidence and all those things back up. And when you won't know it in the moment, which is the infuriating bit.
Yeah, I know, only when you reflect back.
Yeah, you're not going to go to a yoga class and go, oh, I'm finally over my panic attacks and social anxiety. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
But consistency is key. If you do those things, you work on yourself, you'll get to this lovely place 12 months down the line where you'll just glimpse yourself in the mirror and you'll go, Jesus, I haven't felt like that in a while.
Yeah. All of a sudden it's just...
it just clicks and you go, oh my God, this is paying off. And I've had moments, a lot more moments like that recently, and when you get into that space, it's lovely because I've always battled with my subconscious and conscious. I always consciously think, I don't care what people think. But then if someone says you look tired,
you know that you do.
I go into a spiral.
Yeah.
So it's about, when you fill your cup up, you're aligning your subconscious with your conscious mind. So if someone does say something, you can bat it off better than you could before.
Yeah, totally. I love that. So it's the consistency is key.
Yeah.
Be compassionate to yourself and fill up your tokens.
Yeah, and be real. Yeah. Be honest and real, and don't beat yourself up with it. And also tell the people around you. If you are struggling with things, it's super important that the people around you know that, because if people around you don't know what's going on with you, they're actually the first people who will be able to tell the signs, believe it or not. You think you'll know, you won't. It's your partner will go, Lisa's been a bit more snappy with me of late. She's not coming out as more, she's not socialising as more, she's turning up late to things, whatever it may be. They'll notice it before you notice it, and that's when they go, mate, are you okay? And that's my final, I'll end on the are you okay is a good practice in theory, but you really need to go beyond that. You need to go, are you really okay? Yeah. Because if you're not okay, 4 out of 5 people won't tell you. So you have to prod. So it's almost like we're in this all together. Yeah. And by prodding and asking those questions and staying on it, people will eventually open up, and it's just for the betterment of everything if we do it that way, So.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. It's been amazing having you on. And look forward to seeing what's next for Nimbus.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.